Welcome to Timeless Knowledge Discoveries, where we delve into the fascinating corners of history, uncovering stories that shape our world. I'm your host, Noah Lobby. Imagine this: London, 1888. Gas lamps flicker through thick, swirling fog. Horse-drawn carriages clatter over damp cobblestones. In the heart of the East End, in a district called Whitechapel, a palpable fear grips the community. A shadow stalks the dimly lit alleyways, a phantom whose name would become synonymous with terror and history's most enduring unsolved mystery, Jack the Ripper. Who was this infamous figure? For over 130 years, historians, detectives, and armchair sleuths have debated, theorized, and searched, yet the identity of the killer remains shrouded in the London fog. Today, we're stepping back into the late 19th century, exploring the crimes, the context, and the compelling question: can we ever truly know who Jack the Ripper was? Let's uncover the timeless knowledge behind this chilling enigma. To understand the Ripper mystery, we first need to understand Whitechapel in 1888. Forget the romanticized image of Victorian London you might see in some films. Whitechapel was the harsh reality for many. Located in London's East End, it was one of the city's poorest districts. Think overcrowded tenements, known as rookeries, crammed with families living in squalor. Sanitation was poor, disease was rampant, and poverty was a constant struggle. Many residents were recent immigrants, particularly Irish and Eastern European Jewish communities fleeing persecution, trying to carve out a life in challenging circumstances. Work was often scarce, poorly paid, and dangerous. The streets were narrow, winding, and poorly lit, especially the countless courts and alleyways branching off the main roads. Gaslight offered pools of illumination, but deep shadows lurked everywhere, perfect hiding places for secrets and for predators. Crime was common, driven by desperation. And for many women trapped in poverty, sex work was a grim necessity for survival, making them incredibly vulnerable. It's crucial to remember this environment. It wasn't just a backdrop, it shaped the events. The poverty, the anonymity offered by the crowded streets, the lack of street lighting, the transient population, all these factors contributed to the fear and made the police investigation incredibly difficult. This wasn't a quiet village where everyone knew each other. It was a bustling, desperate, and often dangerous corner of a vast metropolis. The story of Jack the Ripper, as we commonly know it, focuses on a specific period, the late summer and autumn of 1888. While other murders occurred in Whitechapel around this time, 5 victims are generally accepted by most ripperologists. That's the term for those who study the case as the work of this single killer. These are often called the Canonical 5. The terror truly began on August 31, 1888, with the murder of Mary Ann Nichols, known as Polly. Her body was discovered in Bucks Row. Just over a week later, on September 8th, Annie Chapman was found dead in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. The fear in Whitechapel escalated dramatically. But the killer wasn't finished. On September 30th, a night that became known as the double event, 2 women were murdered within roughly an hour of each other: Elizabeth Stride in Dutfield's Yard and Catherine Eddowes in Mitre Square. Eddowes' murder was particularly shocking due to its location within the boundary of the City of London Police District, distinct from the Metropolitan Police area covering the rest of Whitechapel, requiring 2 separate police forces to become involved. The final canonical victim was Mary Jane Kelly, murdered indoors at her lodging in 13 Miller's Court on November 9, 1888. This crime was the most brutal of all, and the details sent shockwaves not just through London, but around the world, thanks to the burgeoning newspaper industry. What linked these 5 victims, apart from the horrific nature of their deaths? They were all women struggling with poverty and likely involved in sex work in the Whitechapel area. The killer targeted them in the late hours or early morning, often in secluded or semi-public locations. The speed and brutality suggested a killer with some degree of anatomical knowledge, though this is debated, and a chilling audacity. The community was terrified. Vigilance committees formed, residents demanded action, and an atmosphere of panic and suspicion hung heavy in the foggy air. Who could commit such atrocities and why? The search for answers began immediately, but it was fraught with challenges. Imagine trying to solve these crimes today. We'd have DNA analysis, fingerprint databases, extensive CCTV footage, digital forensics. But in 1888, police work was vastly different. Scotland Yard and the City of London Police were dealing with a type of serial killer phenomenon they hadn't truly encountered before on this scale, and their methods were limited. Forensic science was in its infancy. Fingerprinting wasn't used systematically in Britain until the early 20th century. Identifying blood types wasn't possible. Crime scene preservation was rudimentary compared to modern standards. Sites were often quickly crowded by onlookers, potentially contaminating or destroying evidence. Detectives relied heavily on eyewitness accounts, which were often contradictory or unreliable, especially given the poor lighting and the speed of the attacks. They conducted massive house-to-house searches, interviewed thousands of people, and patrolled the streets relentlessly, often in disguise. But Whitechapel's dense population and maze-like streets made finding one elusive individual incredibly hard. Adding fuel to the fire was the media frenzy. Newspapers, both reputable and sensationalist tabloids, seized upon the story. They published graphic details, speculated wildly, criticized the police, and sometimes even hampered the investigation with inaccurate reporting. This intense media spotlight, however, also ensured the name Jack the Ripper became globally infamous. And where did that name come from? It originated from a letter, purportedly sent by the killer himself, to the Central News Agency on September 27, 1888. It began, "Dear Boss," taunted the police, and was signed Jack the Ripper. Another postcard followed, and later, the truly gruesome, From Hell letter arrived, accompanied by a small box containing part of a human kidney claimed to be from Catherine Eddowes, though this was never proven. Were these letters genuine? It's a huge point of debate. Many investigators at the time, and historians since, believe at least the Dear Boss letter and postcard were hoaxes, possibly written by a journalist to sensationalize the story. The From Hell letter is considered by some to be more likely authentic due to its grim contents. Regardless of their authenticity, the letter cemented the killer's terrifying moniker in the public imagination and added another layer of mystery and dread. The police were swamped not only with the investigation, but also with hundreds of copycat letters. So, with limited forensic tools and a killer who seemingly vanished into the night, who did the police and later, historians suspect? The list of potential rippers is long and varied, ranging from plausible candidates to the outright bizarre. Let's look at a few key names that consistently surface. 1. Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher who came from a respectable background. He mysteriously disappeared shortly after the final canonical murder, Mary Kelly, and his body was found drowned in the River Thames in December 1888. Suicide was suspected. Sir Melville Macnaghten, a high-ranking police official, named Druitt as a prime suspect in a private memo written years later, citing unspecified, private information that suggested Druitt's own family believed him to be the killer. The arguments against him include the lack of concrete evidence linking him to Whitechapel and questions about his timeline. 2. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish immigrant living in Whitechapel who worked as a hairdresser. He suffered from severe mental illness, experiencing auditory hallucinations and paranoia, and was eventually committed to asylums. Macnaghten also named Kosminski in his memo, describing him as having a great hatred of women and strong homicidal tendencies. Chief Inspector Donald Swanson, another key investigator, seemed to favor Kosminski in his own annotated notes discovered much later. Some modern proponents claim potential DNA evidence links him, but this is highly contested and scientifically problematic due to the age and potential contamination of the sample taken from a shore supposedly belonging to Catherine Eddowes, itself of debatable provenance. His known mental state and location make him plausible, but again, no definitive proof exists. 3. Seweryn Kłosowski, alias George Chapman, another Polish immigrant who lived in Whitechapel during the murders. He later moved away, and under the name George Chapman, poisoned 3 of his common-law wives between 1897 and 1901. He was convicted and hanged in 1903. Inspector Frederick Aberline, one of the lead detectives on the Ripper case, reportedly told the arresting officer in the Chapman case, "You've got Jack the Ripper at last." The arguments against him center on his later method, poison, being vastly different from the Ripper's physical attacks. However, some argue killers can change their methods. 4. Other notables. Briefly, the list goes on. Some theories point to Dr. Francis Tumblety, an American quack doctor known for his misogyny and collection of anatomical specimens, who was in London at the time and arrested for unrelated offences before fleeing back to the US. Others suggest Walter Sickert, a famous artist who painted dark scenes of London life. This theory, largely promoted much later, relies on interpretations of his art and alleged hidden confessions, generally dismissed by mainstream historians. There have even been suggestions of royalty, Prince Albert Victor, or conspiracies involving Freemasons, but these lack credible evidence and often veer into pure speculation. The key takeaway here is that for every suspect, there are compelling arguments against their guilt, or at least a profound lack of conclusive evidence for it. Files were lost, memories faded, witnesses died, and the standards of proof were different. What we're left with is a fascinating, frustrating puzzle with many missing pieces. The study of these suspects and the endless debate is often called Ripperology. Over 130 years later, why does this case remain unsolved? Why can't we definitively point the finger? Several factors contribute to the enduring mystery. Lack of forensic technology, as we discussed, this is the biggest hurdle. No DNA, no reliable fingerprinting, limited crime scene analysis. The police did the best they could with the tools available, but those tools were simply not advanced enough for a killer who left few definitive traces. The nature of Whitechapel, the dense, impoverished, and transient nature of the district meant the killer could potentially melt back into the crowd easily. Many residents lived under assumed names or moved frequently. Identifying and tracking individuals was a nightmare. Conflicting evidence and witness reliability, eyewitness accounts varied wildly. Descriptions of men seen with the victims shortly before their deaths were often vague or contradictory. In the dim gaslight and fog, positive identification was nearly impossible. Media interference and hoaxes, the press frenzy and the flood of hoax letters, potentially including the original Jack the Ripper letter, muddied the waters, wasted police time, and created lasting myths. Possible destruction or loss of evidence. Over time, police files may have been lost, destroyed, or simply not retained critical pieces of information that might seem vital today. Key individuals involved took their knowledge to the grave. The killer simply stopped, or moved or died. The canonical murders occurred in a concentrated period. It's possible the killer died, was imprisoned for another crime, emigrated, or was committed to an asylum, like Kosminski. If they simply ceased killing, the trail went cold. It's this combination of factors, primitive science, a challenging environment, unreliable information, and the passage of time that has kept Jack the Ripper's identity locked away. It's become history's ultimate whodunit. While the identity of Jack the Ripper remains elusive, the case left a lasting legacy. It's more than just a grim horror story. It offers valuable insights. Firstly, The Ripper crimes starkly highlighted the horrific social conditions in the East End. The intense media focus, though often sensationalist, drew unprecedented attention to the poverty, squalor, and vulnerability of Whitechapel's residents, particularly women. This arguably contributed to a growing awareness and push for social reforms in the subsequent decades, although progress was slow. Secondly, the case had a significant impact on policing. It exposed the limitations of existing methods and spurred developments. While fingerprinting wasn't immediately adopted because of Ripper, the intense scrutiny on police effectiveness certainly contributed to the pressure to adopt more scientific techniques like the Bertillon system of measurements, and eventually, fingerprinting. The very concept of serial murder began to be understood differently, laying groundwork for future criminal profiling. Thirdly, the Ripper case cemented itself in popular culture. It spawned countless books, films, theories, and, as we mentioned, the field of Ripperology. It speaks to our enduring fascination with unsolved mysteries, the darker side of human nature, and the Victorian era itself. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes, despite our best efforts, history keeps its secrets. But perhaps the most inspiring takeaway, fitting for timeless knowledge discoveries, is the relentless human desire to know. For over a century, people have dedicated themselves to piecing together the puzzle, analyzing evidence, challenging assumptions, and seeking truth, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It reflects our innate curiosity and our drive to understand the past, no matter how dark. It reminds us that history isn't just about dates and facts, but about human stories, enduring questions, and the ongoing search for answers. So, who was Jack the Ripper? The frustrating, yet honest answer is, we still don't know for sure. Was he a mad doctor, a spurned lover, a disenfranchised immigrant, a calculating local, or someone completely unexpected? The evidence points in several directions, but convicts no one beyond a reasonable doubt. The shadow of the Ripper lingers over Whitechapel's history, a symbol of terror, mystery, and the deep social inequalities of Victorian London. The case reminds us of the vulnerability of those living on the margins of society and the limitations faced by investigators in a pre-forensic era. What we do know is the impact these crimes had, the fear they instilled, the questions they raised, and the way they forced society to look into its darker corners. The victims, Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, deserve to be remembered not just as victims of an infamous killer, but as women whose lives reflected the harsh realities of their time. The search for Jack the Ripper continues to capture our imagination, a stark reminder that some historical truths may remain forever lost in the fog. But the pursuit of knowledge, the examination of evidence, and the telling of these stories, that's a journey that never truly ends. What are your theories on Jack the Ripper? Do you think the mystery will ever be solved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from our community of curious minds. Thank you for joining us on Timeless Knowledge Discoveries. If you found this journey into Victorian London's greatest mystery insightful, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And for more explorations of fascinating historical events and fun facts, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering. I'm Noah Lobby, signing off.